Hello from Columbus, Ohio. I'm Scott Foltz alongside Jason Dye. Those stories plus, Texas gets a second shot at Oklahoma, and BYU looks to get back on the winning track against Baylor.
And they're fighting like cats and dogs in the SEC. All that coming up after this. You're watching Sports Talk on CFC, so stick around.
Recapping last week's picks, the Buckeyes had a happy homecoming, wrecking Maryland 66-17. The Buckeyes completely dominated on both sides of the ball, putting up 598 total yards, and the defense coming away with 2 interceptions and a pick six.
Defense continuing to improve for Ohio State. C.J. Stroud on the offensive side on fire. Saw some good play out of Travion Henderson too. I'm sure Maryland was having Buckeye nightmares when they went home.
Absolutely. Now the question is, will teams in the future be having Buckeye nightmares, do you think?
But we'll see. I mean, and some people aren't sold on this improvement, but as long as they're making improvements,
Which they are.
getting down into the meat of the schedule, Penn State, Michigan State, all them.
Yeah.
We'll see, but
Time will tell in the coming weeks.
get some confidence.
Mm-hmm. Looking now at the SEC, Arkansas scored a touchdown on the last second of the game against Ole Miss, leaving the score 52-51. All they had to do was kick the point after to tie it up and take it to overtime. Instead, they went for 2 and couldn't convert, chalking up a second loss in a row for the Hogs.
Just kick the point.
Just kick the point.
Just kick the point. I mean, that's the point of the whole game. Kick the point.
Kick the point. If you kick the point, you tie it up, you have many chances in overtime to pull ahead. In this case, they went for 2, they had 1 chance, it didn't work out for them, and now the Hogs are going in this weekend 2 in a row in the losing column.
Yeah, it hurts you just to when you think about it. It was such a great game, and then
It was.
and then just to not kick the point.
Just bad play calling.
It is horrible decision.
The Red River Showdown turned into quite the showdown as Texas took the early lead and looked to run away with it, but the Sooners rallied behind their backup quarterback and managed to pull ahead 55-48 to remain unbeaten for the year. Are the Sooners really lucky, or are they a little better than we thought?
Lucky. Texas self-destructed.
Mhm.
I mean, there's just what else do you say? You had the lead. You had them right where you want them. You're beating Oklahoma. You're taking it to just. God, you just self-destructed. Another game. It hurt my feelings to watch it. It was just like, come on, man, you had it. You had it.
And a second question after this, does Oklahoma have a new starting quarterback?
And for the time being, it looks like they do. And Rattler's been benched. He has not exactly been good. So I'm still not sold on Oklahoma.
You still think there's something there that we're not seeing?
Yeah, I mean, they need to get through this Big 12, the rest of their Big 12 schedule before I even think about Oklahoma, and I'm just not sold on them.
All right. And our game of the week turned out to be just that, as Iowa hosted Penn State in a defensive and special teams clinic. The Nittany Lions threw a pick on their first offensive play deep in their own territory, but were able to hold the Hawkeyes to a field goal. Penn State looked to be running away with this one, heading into halftime 17-10, but the Hawkeyes defense held on, and their punter pinned the Nittany Lions deep in their own territory more than once. The sold-out crowd in Kinnick Stadium made the snap count almost impossible for Penn State, their offense giving up 40 yards on 8 false start penalties. The Hawkeyes were down 20-16 in the fourth, but a diving touchdown gave them the lead 23-20 with 6.5 left to play. A bizarre bit of play calling as the game drew to an end. The Hawkeyes took a knee, then punted, giving the ball back to Penn State with just under 2 minutes to play, and the Penn State out of timeouts. The Nittany Lions gave it their all going forward on 4th down, but they turned the ball over on downs with 2 seconds remaining, and Iowa wins a barn burner. Important to note, Sean Clifford left the game in the second quarter after a big hit and appeared in street clothes after halftime. What does this mean for Penn State's offense going forward?
It's really critical for Penn State and how healthy is Sean Clifford. But I got 2 words about this game: instant classic.
Absolutely.
I mean, but going back to Sean Clifford, James Franklin has got to be concerned.
Mm-hmm.
Going down the stretch, they're going to get into some meteor games between Ohio State and Michigan. They need Sean Clifford.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely need Sean Clifford.
And Penn State does have a bye week this week, so that will give Clifford another week to rest before they decide are they going to put him on the field week after this.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's some big time questions in Happy Valley.
Mm-hmm. Looking at some upsets from last week, Boise State isn't a name we've heard in a while, but the Broncos stampeded into Provo and after a rough first quarter put up 17 points in the second to pull ahead of the Cougars and kept the lead, holding BYU scoreless for 2 quarters. This game was another story of turnovers, BYU fumbling 3 times and throwing 1 pick.
Turnovers. You've got to win the turnover battle.
Have to win the turnover battle.
Boise State, a name that hasn't been really thought of this year, especially going against a team like BYU, who has been surprisingly good this year. Turnovers, man, they'll kill you.
They will every time.
Every time.
And the biggest upset of the year, the defending national champion Alabama Crimson Tide faced an unranked Texas A&M in a foregone conclusion. But nobody told the Aggies. A&M took an early lead and kept it through halftime, the Tide rallying in the second half, scoring 2 touchdowns in the third and fourth quarters, bringing the score 38-31. With 3 minutes left to play, the Aggies tied it up at 38, and an A&M field goal with 2 seconds remaining handed the Tide their first loss to an unranked team since 2007. And just like that, everybody forgot about Penn State and Iowa. Let's be honest, we never gave this one a second thought, or even a first for that matter. Alabama was going to run over Texas A&M and go on to Mississippi State and so on. This was Rocky knocking out Apollo Creed or Buster Douglas knocking out Mike Tyson. Yeah. Nobody saw this coming. Even if the Aggies don't win another game, I don't think they care. They took down the champs when no one else could.
Yeah, and golly, when we were talking about what games we wanted to cover, I'd even just glazed right over it. I mean,
because Alabama. That wasn't going to be a game. That was going to be Alabama running over an unranked team.
Yeah, they're just going to roll on over and over and over and over and make Texas A&M look foolish. And boy, wrong.
Yeah, that's one we should have picked. That's one that got by us for sure.
Yeah.
Now, the question here: what does this mean for Alabama going forward?
Obviously Alabama has to win out. You still got the SEC title game. There's of course we'll get into this here in a few minutes, but there's some favoritism I feel being played on the part of Alabama, keeping them up in the rankings. But Saban obviously needs to get Bama back on the right track and get back to winning out. So we'll see what happens.
As you said, he stated several weeks ago that he never wanted his team to be seen as ordinary.
Right. Ordinary is destroying the opponent in front of you by 50 plus every week.
Yeah, that's how you be extraordinary. Losing to an unranked team is not how you're extraordinary.
Nah, not at all.
But time will tell what the future holds for the Crimson Tide.
Mm-hmm.
Looking ahead to this weekend, Texas will play Oklahoma again. Oklahoma State, that is. The Horns travel to Stillwater after losing last week to the Sooners, and you can bet they'll have some big chips on their shoulders.
Yeah, and my question is will Texas be kind of sleepwalking after that Oklahoma game? Could be some first quarter blues for Texas getting started again. We'll see how they respond after last week. Texas is going to provide matchup problems for Oklahoma State all day. You've got to find a way to contain that Texas offense. Their defense is a monster. It'll be interesting to see how Oklahoma State handles that. I'm sure they're going to come at it on either side of the ball, balanced attack on offense and defense. And once again, they've got to find a way to contain that Texas offense, or this could get out of hand in a hurry.
So do you think Texas redeems themselves from last week, or will they fall to another Oklahoma team 2 weeks in a row?
I think they do, but I think it's going to be close. I like Texas 35-31.
All right. BYU looking to rebound off their first loss of the season from last week. The Bears lost back in week 5, so both teams are 5-1. These two teams are very evenly matched on paper. Will this be another close one?
I think so. Both teams very similar to last week with Iowa and Penn State, dead even in a lot of categories and strength. Both teams love to thrive off the turnovers. It just seems to be an ongoing thing this year. I think Baylor is going to be a little bit sharper in the passing attack, and I think that makes a difference in this game.
So you think Baylor's going to come over on this one?
I do. I like Baylor 30-27.
Another close one.
Mm-hmm.
Two undefeated SEC teams will clash in Athens as the top-ranked Georgia Bulldogs host the Kentucky Wildcats, who've been on a roll this year, beating Florida and LSU, but both of those programs aren't what they once were. Is Kentucky that good, or have they just been very lucky so far?
I think it's a little bit of a both thing. I think they've improved on both sides of the ball, but golly, Georgia been a monster on defense. They have not given up a lot of points. The strength of this Georgia team, is their defense, and once again, it's going to provide Kentucky a lot of matchup nightmares. The Georgia offense, however, they're going to do enough in this game to get by. I think eventually they're just going to wear Kentucky down quickly and in a hurry. Kentucky has been a Cinderella story of the SEC.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and but they have got to be perfect in this game.
Yeah, against a team like Georgia Bulldogs, you can't afford to have anything go wrong.
Yeah.
So I assume you think Georgia's going to take this one?
Yeah, I think Kentucky comes out fired up. They're gonna be hitting each other back and forth. It could be close, but talent, defense, eventually going to wear out Kentucky. I like Georgia 43-20.
So you think this one's not going to be as close as our other two?
Yeah.
All right.
All right, taking a look at this week's AP Top 10, we got Georgia, as we just stated, taking on Kentucky, Iowa, Cincinnati, Oklahoma at number 4. Once again, I am just not sold. I don't get it. Right now, we would be looking at this as our playoff scenario. I think Oklahoma got a long way to go to prove to me anyway. There's a lot of people in this position saying that about Oklahoma.
Going back to 3 now, Cincinnati.
Yeah.
When's the last time that anyone ever talked about the Cincinnati Bearcats being in the college football playoffs?
Right. Yeah.
Let alone in the top 10, but to be ranked 3rd, Luke Fickell has that team firing on all cylinders.
Yeah, and obviously after a big win over Notre Dame, Cincinnati kind of sleeping under the radar a little bit. I love it. I hope they stay up there and continue to win out. Moving on to number 5, Alabama. Alabama lost to an unranked team.
They did. And they dropped 4 spots.
Ohio State lost in week 2 to Oregon.
A ranked team.
A ranked team. And fell
9 spots.
9 spots.
From the Buckeyes were ranked at 2nd at that time, I believe.
Yeah.
And they fell to 11.
Yeah. Hey, what gives?
Losing to a team that everyone said at the beginning of the season, this will be Ohio State's tough. We said that ourselves back in week 2, that Oregon would be Ohio State's toughest team this year, and that Ohio State would be Oregon's toughest team this year.
Yeah, and that's proven to be true. And then, like I said, Alabama goes in, they lose to Texas A&M, they only drop 4 spots. So that tells me that the AP committee and who's doing all the polling and on all the voters, they're still thinking Alabama's just going to be that team that creeps back in there. I think they're looking ahead a little bit. They're thinking, okay, the Alabama-Georgia showdown. Look, if Alabama goes in and loses twice, and say they lose to Georgia,
then there's no way they belong in the playoffs at all.
But they've already proven to us that losing to an unranked team didn't really matter. It's Alabama.
True.
I just...
But
so what? They're going to lose to
losses
Georgia
in the SEC championship game, because the way it looks now, the SEC title game will be Alabama versus Georgia,
Yeah.
barring some kind of miracle this Saturday. Perhaps Kentucky puts one over, but we don't think they will. And Auburn going over Alabama in their last game of the season, perhaps. Maybe not. But eventually, Alabama and Georgia are going to meet in the SEC title game. That's about a 95% certainty. Only one of them can win.
Right.
If Alabama loses that game and Georgia remains number 1 and is the conference champion, Alabama has no place in the playoffs, in my opinion.
And right, and that's absolutely correct. However, we're already looking at the committee the AP pollers have already just kind of put this A&M loss on the back burner.
Mm-hmm.
And
they're acknowledging it because they have to.
Yeah, but it's like, they lost to Texas A&M, but I think they still got a shot. That's what it tells me. And they lose to Georgia, yeah, they might be out, and they should be out. But it will be very interesting to see where Alabama lays if that happens.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on to number 6, we have The Ohio State University. They continue to improve.
And climb back up the rankings week after week.
Slowly but surely.
Mhm.
Penn State, perfectly okay with them in 7th.
Mhm.
Number 8, Michigan. I'm not shocked. At the same time,
Not sold.
not sold. They did show some weakness here in the last game they played, so it'll be interesting to see. We all know who they play at the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Number 9, Oregon. They continue to after their loss, they're hanging tough at 9. And number 10, Michigan State, who didn't look all that great in their last game, still won, still undefeated.
Mm-hmm.
Still a lot of questions there all of a sudden now too.
Time now for this week's edition of Impact or No Impact. First question, as we've just discussed, Alabama only dropped to 5th after losing to an unranked Texas A&M. Impact or no impact?
Impact. How could it not be an impact? It's here
when the champion loses, that's always an impact.
Yeah, and it shook up the rankings. Obviously, Georgia's your new number 1, but what the impact is the committee, the AP poll. Not really. They acknowledged the loss, but I don't really think they acknowledged the loss.
Mm-hmm. And something interesting to note, 5 of the top 10 teams are Big Ten schools. There's 2 SEC, 1 Pac-12, and a Big 12, and an American Athletic Conference. Could this mean the Big Ten will dominate the postseason?
The Big Ten has struggled in the postseason. The Big Ten has struggled across the board in the last several years in the postseason. Right now, I'm going to say impact. It's good to see them Big Ten schools up there in the top 5.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be interesting to see if this continues where they end up in the postseason with the bowl games. I think it's great. I think it's an impact. I think it also put the rest of the college football world on notice.
All right. And that's our show this week. We'll catch you back here next week for Week 8 for more analysis of our great college football games. You've been watching Sports Talk on CFC. We'll see you next time.